The ship that carried Kang Do-won to his new life was cold. Not because the Valari did not understand temperature. They simply did not think a human would notice or care. It was cargo, after all. A symbol. A thing to be delivered. Do-won sat alone in the small room they had given him. Through the window, he could see stars passing by like raindrops on a car window. He had never been to space before. 6 months ago, he was a paramedic in Bizen, working night shifts and eating instant noodles for dinner. Now he was traveling to marry an alien queen he had never met. The lottery had been simple. Earth needed protection. The Valari Empire had offered it, but they wanted something in return. A marriage. A symbol of unity between their great civilization and the small blue planet they had discovered. Nobody wanted to go. The videos of Valari showed tall creatures with silver skin and 4 eyes. They lived for thousands of years. They ruled over 400 billion people across 3 galaxies. And they thought humans were barely worth noticing. Do-won had watched the lottery announcements for 3 days. He saw the fear in people's eyes. He saw families praying their names would not be called. And on the 3rd day, when a young woman with a newborn baby was selected, he stood up. "I will go instead," he said. The officials had looked at him like he was crazy. Perhaps he was. But Do-won had seen too many people die on his ambulance stretchers to be afraid of death anymore. And that young mother had a child who needed her. He had no one. His sister, Jisoo, had cried when he told her. She was a marine biologist, practical and smart. She never cried. "You are an idiot," she said, hitting his shoulder. "The biggest idiot I know." "Probably," he agreed. But someone had to go. Why you? Why does it always have to be you? He did not have a good answer for that. It was just the way he was made. When there was a fire, he ran toward it. When someone was hurt, he stopped to help. His mother had always said he had too much heart and not enough brain. Now that heart was taking him across the universe to marry a queen who would probably forget his name within a week. The palace of the 9th throne was bigger than any city on Earth. Do-won stepped off the ship and felt very small. The buildings rose so high he could not see their tops. Everything was made of a white stone that seemed to glow from within. Thousands of Valari walked past, most of them not even glancing at the small human being escorted through their streets. He was taken to a preparation room where servants dressed him in strange robes. They did not speak to him. They touched him like he was a mannequin, moving his arms and legs without asking permission. Do-won let them. He understood. To them, he was not really a person. One servant, a young female with pale blue skin, dropped a piece of jewelry. She froze, fear in all 4 of her eyes. Do-won bent down, picked it up, and handed it back to her with a small smile. "It is okay," he said in the Valari language he had been studying for months. His pronunciation was terrible, but the servant's eyes widened in surprise. She had not expected him to speak at all. "Thank you," she whispered, so quiet he barely heard it. It was the first word anyone had spoken to him since he arrived. The wedding ceremony was held in a great hall filled with 10,000 Valari nobles. They all stared at Do-won as he walked down the long aisle toward the throne. He could feel their judgment, their disgust, their amusement. A human, a creature that lived less than 100 years, marrying their eternal queen. It was a joke to them. But Do-won kept walking. He had learned long ago that people would always have opinions about him. The only thing he could control was his own feet, his own actions. So he put one foot in front of the other and walked toward his future. Queen Valara of the 9th throne was beautiful in a way that made no human sense. She was 7 feet tall, with skin like polished silver and 4 eyes that shifted between purple and gold. Her dress was made of light itself, flowing around her like water. When she looked at Do-won, he felt like an insect being examined under a microscope. But he bowed anyway. Not because he was afraid, but because respect cost nothing and meant everything. The ceremony lasted 6 hours. Do-hwan stood perfectly still the entire time. His legs screamed in pain. His back ached. But he did not move, did not complain, did not ask for a break. The Valari priest spoke words he did not fully understand. Rings were exchanged. Vows were made in languages both ancient and new. Through it all, Valara watched him with curiosity. She had expected the human to fidget, to show weakness, to embarrass himself before her court. But he simply stood there, patient as stone, his eyes forward and his shoulders straight. When the ceremony finally ended, Valara noticed something strange. The human's hands were trembling slightly. Not from fear, she realized. From the effort of standing still for so long without complaint. He was in pain, but he had refused to show it. Interesting. The feast that followed was overwhelming. Do-hwan was given foods he could not name and drinks that made his head spin after a single sip. Nobles came to inspect him like an animal at a zoo. Some spoke to him in slow, loud voices, as if he were stupid. Others ignored him completely, speaking to Valara about him as if he were not there. How long do these creatures live? One lord asked. 80 years, if they are lucky, Valara answered. How amusing. He will be dead before your next birthday celebration. Do-hwan said nothing. He simply ate his food and watched the room. He noticed which servants looked tired. He noticed which nobles drank too much. He noticed the small cracks in the great hall's perfect walls. He had always been good at noticing things that others missed. After the feast, they were taken to the royal chambers. Do-hwan expected Valara to dismiss him, to send him to some corner of the palace where he would be forgotten. Instead, she stood by the window, looking out at the stars. You may speak, she said, without turning around. Do-hwan thought for a moment. There were many things he could say. He could ask about his duties. He could try to impress her with flattery. He could beg for mercy or kindness. Instead, he said, Are you tired? This must have been a long day for you too. Valara turned. All 4 of her eyes blinked in surprise. In 3,000 years of life, no one had ever asked her that question. No one had ever considered that a queen might also feel exhausted. I do not understand you, she said. Do-hwan smiled. It was a small smile, tired, but genuine. That is okay. I do not understand me either, most of the time. He bowed again and asked permission to sleep. She gave it, still watching him with those strange shifting eyes. As he walked to the small room connected to her chambers, she heard him humming a soft melody under his breath. A human song, perhaps. Something from his home. That night, a general named Decaral spoke with his officers in a private room. The human is a weakness, he said. A stain on the throne. He will be dead within a year, either by assassination or by his own irrelevance. The officers nodded in agreement. They had all seen the small, fragile creatures standing next to their magnificent queen. It was an insult to their entire species. In his small room, Do-hwan heard none of this. But even if he had, he would not have been surprised. He had been underestimated his entire life. It had never stopped him before. He lay down on the unfamiliar bed and looked at the ceiling. Tomorrow he would start learning. He would learn the names of the servants. He would learn the layout of the palace. He would learn how to be useful, even if no one expected him to be. That was all he had ever known how to do. To be useful. To help. To care. It was not much, but it was everything he had. And sometimes that was enough. 3 months passed in the palace of the 9th throne. Do-hwan learned to walk its endless hallways without getting lost. He learned which doors led to gardens and which led to places where humans were not welcome. He learned the names of 47 servants, 3 cooks. and one very old gardener who tended flowers that smelled like honey and rained out every week. He called his sister on a communication device the palace had provided. Jisoo always looked worried during these calls. "Are they treating you well?" she asked every time. "They are treating me like furniture," Do-hwan replied honestly. "But furniture that is allowed to walk around and eat. That is not funny. It is a little funny." Jisoo shook her head. "Have you talked to the queen? Is she kind to you?" Do-hwan thought about this. Valara spoke to him sometimes, usually to ask simple questions about human customs or biology. She was not cruel. She was not kind. She was curious, in the way a scientist is curious about an interesting insect. "She is learning," he said. "Learning what?" "That humans are worth learning about." The servant assigned to Do-hwan was named Myra. She was young by Valari standards, only 200 years old. She had been given the job because no one else wanted it. Taking care of the human was seen as a shameful task, something only the lowest servants would accept. Myra was terrified of Do-hwan at first. She had heard stories about humans. They were violent creatures from a primitive world. They ate the flesh of other animals. They killed each other in great wars over pieces of land. She expected Do-hwan to be rude, demanding, and dangerous. Instead, he said good morning to her every day. He thanked her for every small thing she did. He asked about her family, her interests, her dreams. He listened when she spoke, which was something no noble had ever done. At first, Myra thought it was a trick, some clever human strategy to gain her trust before betraying her. But weeks passed, and Do-hwan never asked for anything in return. He just kept being kind, day after day, as steady as the rising sun. One evening, Do-hwan noticed that Myra looked pale. Her movements were slow. Her 4 eyes were dim instead of bright. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Myra hesitated. "This morning." "It is night now. You have worked all day without food?" "There is much to do. The senior servants give extra duties to those who serve the human." Do-hwan felt a flash of anger, not at Myra, but at the system that treated her this way. He walked to his small kitchen area and began making food. It was simple food, things he had asked the cooks to prepare in the human style. Rice, vegetables, and a sauce that was probably not quite right but was close enough. "Sit," he said, placing the plate in front of Myra. "Eat. I cannot eat your food." "It is not proper." "Then I am improperly asking you to eat improperly." He smiled. "Please, you cannot take care of me if you do not take care of yourself first." Myra ate. The food was strange to her, but not bad. And the act of sitting while someone served her made her feel something she had not felt in years. Seen. From that night on, Do-hwan made sure Myra ate properly. He adjusted his own schedule so that she could rest more. He learned which of her duties could be done by him instead, and he did them without complaint. Slowly, the fear in her eyes was replaced by something else. Something like loyalty. Something like love. Reports began reaching Queen Valara. Strange reports about her human husband. He stopped Lord Keth's servant from being punished yesterday, Commander Dekarol said, his voice full of disapproval. The servant broke a ceremonial vase. The human stepped forward and claimed he had broken it himself. Why would he do that? Valara asked. I do not know. The punishment was only 50 lashes. The servant would have survived. Only 50 lashes, Valara repeated quietly. She had never thought about what those words meant before. Only 50 lashes. More reports came. The human sat with the old gardener, Tove, when he was dying. Sat for 9 hours, holding his hand, telling him stories about a planet called Earth, where the sky was blue and the oceans were wide. The human taught 3 young servants to read during his free time. He said all beings deserved to know how words worked. The human found a small creature, something like a cat, but with 6 legs, injured in the gardens. He spent 2 hours cleaning its wounds and building it a shelter. He named it Bomi, which apparently meant spring in his language. Dekarol was frustrated by these reports. They did not fit his understanding of humans. They were supposed to be selfish, violent, and stupid. But Dawan was none of these things. He's playing a long game, Dekarol insisted, building allies among the servants, waiting for a chance to strike. Valara said nothing, but she began watching her husband more carefully. One night, fire broke out in the servant quarters. It started in the kitchen and spread quickly through the old wooden structures. By the time the alarm was raised, flames were already climbing the walls. The emergency response team was 5 minutes away. In 5 minutes, people would die. Dohan did not wait 5 minutes. He ran toward the fire while everyone else ran away. The heat was terrible. The smoke was thick and black. But he had been a paramedic for 15 years. He had worked building fires, car accidents, and disaster zones. He knew what to do. "Everyone out," he shouted in Valari. "Follow my voice. Stay low." He found 3 servants trapped in a collapsed hallway. One of them was Mira. Her leg was broken, and she could not walk. Without hesitation, Doan lifted her onto his back. He grabbed the hands of the other 2 and pulled them toward the exit. The ceiling was falling. The air was poison. His lungs burned, and his eyes watered until he could barely see. But he kept moving, kept walking, kept carrying them forward until they burst out into the cool night air. Other servants were injured. Burns, broken bones, smoke in their lungs. Dohan triaged them like he was back in Bizen, separating the critical cases from the stable ones, using torn cloth as bandages and his own hands to stop bleeding. When the emergency team finally arrived, they found the human covered in ash and blood, still working, still helping, still refusing to stop. "You need medical attention," the lead medic said, reaching for Doan. "Them first," Doan replied, pointing to the servants. "I am okay." "You are not okay. You have smoke inhalation. You have burns on your arms. I said them first." The medic looked at Valara, who had arrived at the scene. The queen nodded, and the medic obeyed. The servants were treated first. Dawan was treated last, after he had personally checked on every single person. He had helped rescue. Then he collapsed. Valara visited him in the medical bay the next morning. He was awake, but weak. His arms were wrapped in bandages. His voice was rough from the smoke damage. "You are foolish," Valara said. It was not a question. "Yes," Dohan agreed. "You could have died." "Yes. Why did you do it?" "Those servants mean nothing to you. They are not your people." Dawan looked at her with tired eyes. "They were scared," he said simply. "Someone had to help." Valara did not understand. In her world, you helped people who could help you in return. You saved those who were valuable. The servants in that fire were replaceable, easily trained, not worth risking anything important. But Doan had risked his life for them without thinking twice, without expecting anything back, without even considering the cost. "You confuse me," Valara said. "Good," Doan replied. And then, amazingly, he smiled. "That means you are paying attention." Valara left the medical bay with more questions than answers. She returned the next day, and the day after. Each time, she found Doan talking to nurses, learning their names, asking about their families. Even injured and weak, he could not stop being kind. On the 4th day, she brought him flowers from the royal garden. She did not know why. She just did. Dawan looked at the flowers for a long moment. Then he looked at her. "Thank you," he said. "They are beautiful. They are just flowers. Nothing is just anything. Everything means something if you pay attention." Valara sat down beside his bed. For the first time since their wedding, she did not feel like she was observing an insect. She felt like she was sitting with a person. Perhaps, she thought, humans were more complicated than anyone had believed, and perhaps this particular human was more complicated still. 6 months after his arrival, Kang Do-won was no longer invisible. The servants whispered about him in the hallways. They called him the Kind One in voices full of wonder. No noble had ever treated them with respect. No royal had ever learned their names. But this strange human from a strange planet remembered everyone. He asked about their children. He shared food from his own table. He fixed small problems that no one else noticed. The lower classes of Valari society began to see Do-won differently. He was not just the queen's human pet. He was something new, something they had never seen before. This made certain nobles very nervous. Lord Kethvin was the leader of the purist faction. He was old, powerful, and convinced that aliens had no place in the Valari Empire, especially not in the royal palace, especially not in the queen's bed. This is an insult to our entire civilization, he told his followers in a secret meeting. A human sits at our queen's side while true Valari nobles are ignored. It cannot continue. What do you suggest? Asked one of his allies. The human must die, quietly, an accident perhaps, or a sudden illness. Humans are fragile creatures. No one will be surprised if this one breaks. The plan was set into motion. 3 assassins were hired. They were professionals, trained in silent killing. They would enter Do-won's chambers at night and make sure he never woke up. But Lord Kethvin made a mistake. He spoke too freely at a party, hinting at his plans to a woman named Lady Soren. He thought she was loyal to his cause. He was wrong. Lady Soren had a son, a young man who had fallen into addiction, lost in a haze of chemicals that were slowly killing him. The doctors had given up. His family had given up. Everyone had given up except Kang Do-won. Do-won had noticed the young man during a palace event. He recognized the signs of addiction immediately. He had seen them many times in Bizum, in the patients he carried to hospitals in the back of his ambulance. Without asking for permission or reward, Do-won had spent weeks helping the young man recover. He sat with him through the worst nights. He cleaned up after the sickness and the shaking. He talked to him for hours about hope and second chances and the future that was still waiting. The young man survived. He was clean now, learning a trade, becoming a person again. And his mother had never forgotten who saved him. So when Lady Soren heard about the assassination plot, she went straight to Do-won. "They are coming for you tonight," she whispered, her voice trembling. 3 killers. Lord Kethvin hired them. Do-won listened calmly. He asked a few questions about the details. Then he thanked her and asked her to leave quietly. "Are you not afraid?" Lady Soren asked, confused. "Yes," Do-won admitted. "But fear is not a reason to stop thinking clearly. Go now. Protect yourself and your family. I will handle this." Lady Soren left, still unsure if the human understood the danger he was in. 3 professional killers. 1 fragile human. The math seemed simple. But Lady Soren did not know what Do-won knew. That night, Do-won did not run to the queen. He did not call for guards. He did not hide. Instead, he sat in his room and waited. He turned off most of the lights, leaving only a single lamp burning. He placed a chair in the center of the room and sat in it facing the door. When the assassins came, they were surprised to find him awake. "You are not sleeping," said the leader, a tall Valari with scars across his face. "No," Do-won agreed. "I have been waiting for you." The assassins looked at each other. This was not normal behavior. Targets ran. Targets begged. Targets did not sit calmly and wait for death. "You know why we are here," the leader said. Yes, Lord Kethvin sent you to kill me because I embarrass him. Because a human in the palace makes him feel small. Because he cannot accept that the universe is bigger than his understanding. You talk too much for a dead man. Perhaps, but I am not dead yet, and I would like to offer you a deal. The leader laughed. What deal can a human offer us? A conversation. 10 minutes of your time. After that, if you still want to kill me, I will not fight back. I promise. The assassins found this amusing. What could a weak human possibly say that would change anything? But they were also curious. And 10 minutes was nothing against their entire lives. Speak, the leader said. Doan took a deep breath. I was a paramedic on Earth. Do you know what that means? It means I spent 15 years picking up the broken pieces of people's lives. I held people as they died. I carried children out of burning buildings. I talked a man out of a suicide bombing by sitting with him for 11 hours. And this makes you special? No, it makes me ordinary. On Earth, millions of people do what I did. We run toward danger, not away from it. We hold the hands of strangers in their worst moments. We give our blood to people we will never meet. Doan leaned forward. But that is not why I am telling you this. I am telling you this because I see you. You see me? The leader's voice was mocking. I see the scars on your face. Old scars. Childhood scars. I see the way your partners look at you when you are not watching. There is fear there, but also loyalty. You built this team from nothing. You protect them. They are your family. Dawan's voice was soft. You are not evil. You are just surviving in a world that never gave you a fair chance. The room went silent. The leader's expression changed. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, recognition, truth. You do not know me, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. I know enough. I know that killing me will not change your life. Lord Kethvin will pay you, and then he will forget you. But I can offer you something different. I can offer you a chance to be seen, to matter, to build something instead of destroying something. How? Work for the Queen, not as assassins, but as protectors. I will speak to her. I will explain that you came to warn me about the plot. No one needs to know the truth. The leader stared at Doan for a long time. Then he moved, fast. The blade flashed in the lamplight, aimed directly at Dohan's heart. Dohan caught the blade with his bare hand. Blood dripped from his fingers. The pain was enormous, but he did not let go. He held the blade and looked directly into the assassin's eyes. I spent 15 years learning how to save lives, Dohan said, his voice steady despite the pain. I have been stabbed twice, shot once. I know how to survive. But I also know that the best victories are the ones where no one dies. So I am asking you, please put down the weapon. Let us find another way. The leader pulled back the blade. Dohan's blood stained the metal red. Human blood, fragile and mortal. But the human was still standing, still calm, still offering a hand. The assassin looked at his partners. They were watching him, waiting for his decision. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the leader put down his weapon. You are the strangest creature I have ever met, he said. Thank you, Doan replied. And then he began explaining proper wound care to the confused assassins, using his own bleeding hand as an example. That was how Valara found them an hour later. 3 professional killers sitting on the floor, watching a bleeding human demonstrate how to wrap bandages. The weapons were in a pile in the corner, forgotten. What is happening here? Valara demanded. I made some new friends, Dohan said cheerfully. Then he passed out from blood loss. Valara caught him before he hit the ground. She held his small, fragile body in her arms and felt his heart beating. Still alive. Still fighting. Still impossibly, stubbornly human. Later, in the medical bay, she asked him why he had not called for help. "Because fighting would have meant someone dying," he said. "And I have seen enough death. I wanted to try something different." "You risked your life on a conversation." "Yes, and it worked." Valara shook her head. "Humans are not weak," she said slowly, realizing the truth as she spoke it. "You are relentless. You are built from suffering, and you turn that suffering into compassion instead of cruelty." Dawan smiled. His hand was wrapped in bandages, but his eyes were bright. "Now you are starting to understand," he said. Lord Kethvin was arrested that night. The 3 assassins became Dohwan's personal guards. And Valara began to look at her human husband with new eyes. Not as an insect. Not as a curiosity. But as something remarkable wrapped in ordinary skin. 8 months into his marriage, Kang Dohwan woke to the sound of alarms. The palace was in chaos. Servants ran through the hallways. Soldiers rushed to their stations. Something terrible had happened. The Drath Collective had attacked. The Drath were ancient enemies of the Valari Empire. They were creatures of shadow and hunger, living in the darkest parts of space. For 1,000 years, they had been quiet. Now they were awake, and they were angry. In 1 week, 3 core worlds fell. Billions of Valari died. The Empire's military, so proud and powerful, was broken again and again by the Drath's endless swarms. Valara barely slept. She spent her days in the war room, surrounded by generals and advisors, trying to stop the bleeding. But nothing worked. For every Drath ship they destroyed, 10 more appeared. For every world they defended, 2 more were lost. Dohwan watched his wife crumble under the weight of command. Her silver skin grew dull. Her 4 eyes lost their brightness. She carried the deaths of billions on her shoulders, and it was crushing her. He began attending the war councils. Not to speak, but to watch. To listen. To understand. At first, the generals ignored him. What could a human know about interstellar warfare? But Dohwan sat quietly in the corner, taking notes in a small book. Observing everything. On the 10th day of the war, General Dekkaral proposed a terrible plan. "We must abandon the colony on Veth Prime," he said, pointing at a holographic map. 2 million people live there, but defending it is impossible. If we sacrifice them, we can redirect our forces to protect the more valuable worlds. The other generals nodded. It made strategic sense. 2 million lives for billions saved. Valara closed her eyes. She had made hard choices before. But something about this one felt different. Wrong. "Do it," she whispered. "No." Everyone turned. Dohwan was standing, his small book closed in his hands. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "The human speaks?" Dekkaral's voice dripped with contempt. "This is a war council, not a servants' meeting." "On Earth, we have a saying," Dohwan continued, ignoring the insult. "Leave no one behind. I understand strategy. I understand mathematics. But if you abandon those people, what exactly are you fighting to protect? We are fighting to save the Empire. And what is the Empire? Is it territory? Is it resources? Or is it the people who live within it?" Dohwan walked toward the holographic map, his eyes fixed on the small dot that represented Veth Prime. "I am just a paramedic from a small planet. But I have seen what happens when you start measuring lives against each other. When you decide some people are worth saving and others are not. It is a path that leads nowhere good." Dekkaral slammed his fist on the table. "You know nothing of war. You come from a species that cannot even leave its own solar system." "You are right. I know nothing of your wars." Dohwan's voice remained calm. "But I know about human wars. And I know that we have faced impossible odds before, many times. And we did not survive by abandoning our own. He pulled up files on the holographic display. Human history files. Images and text that seemed primitive compared to Valari technology, but told stories that made even the generals pause. Thermopylae, Dowan said. 300 soldiers stood against an army of hundreds of thousands. They all died, but they bought time for their people to prepare, to fight back, to survive. He changed the display. Stalingrad, a frozen city, surrounded by enemies. The people there had no food, no heat, no hope. But they refused to surrender. For months, they fought street by street, building by building. And they won. Another image. Dunkirk. An army trapped on a beach, waiting to be destroyed. But ordinary people came in small boats. Fishing boats. Private boats. They crossed a dangerous sea again and again to save their soldiers. Not because they were ordered to, because they could not bear to leave their people behind. The room was silent. Even Dekarol had no response. Humans are not strong, Dowan said. We are not fast. We do not have claws or shields or telepathy. But we do not stop. We get back up. We adapt. And we never, ever abandon our own. He looked at Valara. That is our power. The only power we have. And I think it might be useful here. Valara stared at him. This small, fragile creature who had been given to her as a symbol of submission. This ordinary human from an ordinary planet. What do you propose? She asked. Dowan outlined a plan. It was not brilliant. It was not elegant. But it was stubborn. Instead of pulling back to defend only the valuable worlds, they would hold every inch of territory. They would make the Drath pay for every meter of space. They would fight not to win, but to buy time. Time to evacuate civilians. Time to build new defenses. Time to find the Drath's weakness. This will cost lives, Dekarol said. Yes, but those who fight will choose to fight. They will know why they are dying. And the people they save will remember their sacrifice forever. Dowan's voice broke slightly. On Earth, we have another saying. No greater love has a man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. The vote was taken. Against all expectations, the generals approved Dowan's plan. Perhaps they were desperate. Perhaps they were curious. Perhaps something in his words touched a part of them they had forgotten existed. The battle for Veth Prime became legendary. The Valari forces, expected to retreat, instead dug in and fought. They used every trick, every tactic, every ounce of strength they had. The Drath, expecting easy conquest, found themselves grinding against a wall that would not break. Behind the lines, evacuation ships carried civilians to safety. 2 million people escaped because soldiers chose to stay and fight. The war lasted another 3 months. Slowly, the tide turned. The Drath, frustrated by unexpected resistance, made mistakes. The Valari exploited those mistakes. Allies joined the fight, inspired by stories of impossible courage. When the final battle was won, the Empire celebrated. Valara was hailed as a hero, but she knew the truth. She had almost given up. She had almost surrendered to despair, thought it was the human who had saved them. Not with strength or technology, with words, with ideas, with the simple belief that every life mattered. She found Dowan after the victory celebration. He was alone on a balcony, staring at the stars. He was crying. Why are you weeping? Valara asked, sitting beside him. We won. I am crying for the ones who did not survive, Dowan said. For the soldiers who gave their lives. For the Drath who died too. They were also someone's children, someone's family. The Drath were our enemies. Yes, and they are still dead. And that is still sad. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. This is my power, I suppose. My curse. I feel all of it. Every death. Every loss. It never becomes normal for me. Valara looked at him for a long time. This fragile human who carried the weight of the universe in his heart. How do you bear it? She asked. I do not, he admitted. I just keep walking, one foot in front of the other, one day at a time, one person at a time. He took a shaky breath. And I remember that for every death, there is also a life saved. For every loss, there is someone who still has hope. The darkness is real, but so is the light. Valara reached out and took his hand. His small human hand with its fragile bones and soft skin. He was so breakable, so temporary. He would live less than a century, then disappear like morning mist. But in this moment, sitting beside him under the stars, she understood something that changed her forever. Humans were not weak. Despite their fragility, they were strong because of it. They knew their lives were short, so they fought to make every moment matter. They knew their bodies were soft, so they built shields out of courage instead. They knew they would die, so they lived with desperate intensity that immortals could never understand. Doan was not powerful because he could not be killed. He was powerful because he knew he could be killed, and he chose to care anyway. That was humanity's true gift. The ability to love even when love meant loss. The courage to hope even when hope seemed foolish. The stubbornness to keep fighting even when fighting seemed pointless. Valara squeezed his hand gently, careful not to break his delicate fingers. Thank you, she said. For what? For showing me what strength really looks like. They sat together in silence as the stars wheeled overhead. And for the first time in a very long war, Valara felt something she had almost forgotten. Peace. 1 year had passed since Kang Doan arrived at the palace of the Ninth Throne. 1 year since he stepped off a cold ship as cargo. 1 year since he bowed before an alien queen who thought he was nothing. Everything had changed. The palace was different now. Servants walked with their heads high, knowing their names would be remembered. Nobles spoke more carefully, aware that cruelty had consequences. Even the walls seemed brighter, as if the stone itself had absorbed some of the kindness that now filled its halls. Dohan was no longer invisible. He had become something strange and wonderful. Part advisor, part counselor, part friend. Nobles came to him with their problems. Servants came to him with their hopes. Even the generals, who had once mocked him, now asked for his thoughts on difficult matters. He still wore simple clothes. He still ate simple food. He still spent his mornings learning Valari language, though his accent remained terrible. But when he walked through the palace, people bowed. Not because they were ordered to, because they wanted to. The 3 former assassins were his constant shadows. They had become his loyal guards, following him everywhere, ready to die for the man they had once been sent to kill. When people asked why, they struggled to explain. He sees us, the leader would say, not what we were, what we could become. On the anniversary of his arrival, Valara called a great assembly. Every noble, every general, every important person in the empire gathered in the throne room. Holographic screens carried the event to billions of viewers across the stars. Dawan stood beside the throne, uncomfortable with the attention. He had asked Valara not to make a fuss. She had smiled and ignored him. 1 year ago, Valara began, her voice carrying across the vast room. I accepted a human as my husband. I did this for politics, for alliance, for peace with a small planet that barely registered on our maps. She paused. I was a fool. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I thought I was receiving a tribute, a symbol, a pet. Valara looked at Doan with eyes that glowed gold with emotion. Instead, I received a teacher, a partner, a light in the darkness I did not know I was living in. She raised her hand, and a holographic document appeared in the air. Today, I sign this declaration. From this moment forward, humans are no longer classified as a protectorate species. They are allies, equal partners in the Valari Empire. They will have seats on our councils. Their voices will be heard in our decisions. Their rights will be protected by our laws. The room erupted. Some nobles cheered. Others gasped in shock. A few looked angry. But Valara's expression allowed no argument. This is not charity, she continued. This is recognition. Humans have proven themselves worthy of respect. Not through technology or military power, but through something rarer, something more precious. She turned to Dowan. Compassion, courage, the refusal to give up, even when the universe seems determined to crush them. After the ceremony, Valara and Dowan walked alone in the royal garden. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Myra followed at a distance, no longer a servant but a trusted friend. You did not need to do that, Dowan said quietly. The declaration. The ceremony. I wanted to. The galaxy needed to understand. Understand what? Valara stopped walking. She turned to face him, her four eyes studying his face with an intensity that made him blush. What are you, truly? She asked. I have watched you for a year. I have seen you do impossible things. You turned assassins into protectors. You changed the course of a war with words. You made an entire empire see servants as people. She shook her head slowly. No ordinary human could have done what you did. Dowan was quiet for a moment. He bent down and picked a small flower from the garden path. Blue petals, delicate as paper. I am ordinary, he said finally. That is the point. I do not understand. Any human could have done what I did. We are all like this. All of us carry the same capacity for kindness, for courage, for stubborn love. He twirled the flower between his fingers. We just need someone to show us it is okay to care. Someone to go first. Someone to prove that softness is not weakness. Valara considered this. Then she walked to a terminal embedded in a nearby pillar and accessed Earth's historical database. She had done this before, reading about human wars and inventions. But tonight, she looked deeper. She saw the plagues that killed millions and the doctors who worked until they collapsed trying to save lives. She saw the earthquakes that leveled cities and the neighbors who dug through rubble with bare hands to find survivors. She saw the famines that starved entire nations and the strangers who shared their last bread with people they would never meet again. She saw wars fought for terrible reasons, but also soldiers who carried wounded enemies to safety. She saw 10,000 years of human history, suffering beyond imagination, cruelty that made her sick, but also, woven through it all like golden thread, compassion, love, hope. Humans were not remarkable despite their suffering. They were remarkable because of it. Every human alive was the child of survivors. Every human carried in their blood the memory of ancestors who had endured the unsurvivable. They were built from generations of people who had chosen kindness in the darkest moments, who had refused to let horror turn them into monsters. Dowan was not special because he was different from other humans. He was special because he was exactly like them. I understand now, Valara whispered. She turned off the display and walked back to Dowan. He was still holding the little blue flower, waiting patiently, the way he always did. I thought I was marrying a nobody, she said. You did, Dowan replied. No. Valara reached out and took his hand, the flower crushed gently between their palms. I married humanity itself. All of it. The suffering and the survival. The weakness and the strength. The fragile bodies and the unbreakable spirits. Dawan smiled. That same small, tired, genuine smile he'd given her on their wedding night. "And?" he asked. "Any regrets?" Valara laughed. It was a strange sound. Valari did not laugh often, but she could not help herself. This ridiculous, wonderful, impossible human had taught her to laugh again. "No regrets," she said. "Not one." They walked together back to the palace as the twin suns disappeared below the horizon. Dawan mentioned that he was teaching the palace children how to make kimchi. Valara admitted she had no idea what kimchi was. Dawan promised to make some for her, warning that the smell might be unusual for Valari's senses. "I look forward to it," Valara said. "Even if it smells terrible?" "Especially then. I am learning that the best things in life often come in strange packages." Dawan laughed. Then he stopped and looked up at the emerging stars. "Do you think the galaxy will accept us?" he asked. "Humans, I mean. As equals. Some will. Some will not. Change is slow, even for immortals. Then we will be patient. One person at a time. One act of kindness at a time." He squeezed her hand. "That is how humans have always changed the world. Not with grand gestures, but with small moments. A meal shared. A hand held. A name remembered." Valara nodded. She was beginning to understand this strange human philosophy. Power was not about control. It was about connection. Strength was not about force. It was about showing up, day after day, for the people you loved. Later that night, as Dawan slept peacefully beside her, Valara made a private note in her journal. "The galaxy will learn, in time, that there is no such thing as an average human. They are all, every single one of them, impossibly stubborn miracles wrapped in flesh. They shine brightest in darkness. They grow strongest under pressure. They love fiercest when love costs everything. And that is the most terrifying, most beautiful, most inspiring thing the universe has ever seen." She looked at her sleeping husband, at his small body and his fragile hands and his ordinary face. He was nothing special. He was everything special. And she was grateful, for the first time in 3,000 years, that she had been wrong. The twin moons rose over the palace. Somewhere in the gardens, a small six-legged creature named Bomi hunted insects. In the servant quarters, Myra slept soundly, dreaming of a future she had never dared imagine. And across the stars, billions of humans looked up at the night sky, not knowing that one of their own had changed the course of history. Just by being human, just by being kind, just by refusing, no matter what, to give up. The end.